Hello and welcome to Smart Investing, brought to you by Aditya Birla Sun Life Mutual Fund and Cafe Mutual. Friends, just like saplings need to be nurtured to become a plant or tree, your investment also needs your care and attention for growth. In fact, timely review of mutual fund investment portfolio can help you make improvements and align investment along with your changing needs and economic situation. To help investors learn simple tips to monitor mutual fund investment portfolio, we have with us Vidya Bala, founding partner and head research and product primeinvestor.com. Vidya is a chartered accountant with extensive experience in market analysis. Before in primeinvestor.com, she has worked with reputed brands like Funds India and the Hindu Business Line. Vidya will be in conversation with Mr. S. Gururaj, Assistant Vice President, Investor Education and Distribution Development at Aditya Birla Sun Life Mutual Fund. Mr. Gururaj has done many investor education programs across the country. He is well known for simplifying complex financial jargons. He is postgraduate in statistics from Loyola College in Chennai. Over to you, Mr. Gururaj.
Yeah, thanks, Nishant, and warm welcome to all the participants on behalf of Aditya Birla Sun Life Mutual Fund. As Nishant was mentioning, we are celebrating our 75th year of independence, and that's where we launched this series of program called as How to Achieve Your Financial Independence. And obviously, if you need to achieve your financial independence, we can't ignore monitoring your portfolio. That's where in joint association with Cafe Mutual, we thought this could be a topic of great value. And who else to have than Vidya for this program, which are a vast experience. I'm sure she's going to add a lot of value to you. And with that, let's start our Q&A session in a kind of Q&A session, I'll say, Vidya. So it is more of an interactive session. And of course, participants, don't worry. We'll also take your Q&A, keep putting it in the Q&A or chat box, and we'll take it at the end of the session. Nishant will also be monitoring the Q&A, so we'll take all your questions also. Vidyaji, to start with, I always say that monitoring has always been the last step in financial planning. We always end the financial planning by saying that review and monitor your portfolio. So when it comes to monitoring, just please let the participants know what do you do when you monitor a portfolio, and is that important? Your thoughts on it, Vidyaji. Yeah.
Right. So, like Nishant rightly started with saying about nurturing, a plant. Your portfolio basically needs nurture, right? So, while you may be doing your job of regularly saving and investing, you may also need to see if your money is growing the way it ought to, right? So for that, broadly, I would say just two things are needed. One, you need to regularly, apart from doing your own hygiene on, regularly investing, averaging, etc., you need to basically see if your funds continue to perform the way you thought they would, right? So you picked funds believing that they are good funds, that they will perform for you. So this process is called review of funds. That is periodically seeing if your fund performance is in line with their peers, their category average, benchmark, etc. So that's a review of your funds in your own portfolio. The second thing is more to do with your own portfolio, not so much the product, which is rebalancing. People often confuse review and rebalancing. There is a difference. Review is about looking at the funds themselves, seeing if they are performing well or they are lagging, or whether it's time for you to move out, etc. Rebalancing is all about your asset allocation, where you started out with and where you are today. Right. So, for example, you start with a 60-40 portfolio, and over a period of time, because, one asset class swells more than the other, typically equity, for instance, tends to, grow faster than the others. You might end up with, in a year or two, depending on the market, say a 65-35 or a 70-30 portfolio. Now, what happens is that you have one asset class that has inflated much more than where you started out with. Yes, it will grow, so naturally it will inflate, but this has obviously grown at a much higher pace than the other asset class. It essentially means that it's overvalued, right? So what you're trying to do by rebalancing is bringing it back to the original point at which you started, which is in our case, the 60-40. So by bringing it back to 60-40, you achieve two things. One, you are limiting your own risk profile or your where you started off with. You come back and stay put at the level of risk that you can handle. Two, very importantly, you either without your own knowledge, you book profit or you average, right? For, like I said, if 60-30 has gone to say, 60-40 has gone to say 70-30, by bringing it to 60-40 again, you are booking some profits from the inflated asset class, in this case, which is equity. But supposing it's a down market, your equity at 60-40 may have fallen to say, 55%. So from 60, it has gone to 55 and this has gone to, 45. Then you will be shifting from debt to equity, which essentially means you are averaging more in equity. So although you're not really trying to time the market, you're looking at your own portfolio and rebalancing it. And effectively, you are either averaging or you're taking out some profits. Now, this is a good hygiene because one, it helps to preserve. Two, it helps to grow. Preserve as in when it's, asset is inflated, you're bringing it back. Two, you're also averaging when the market falls without really the need to time the market. So fund review, which is, we will discuss more about it. I'm sure Mr. Gururaj will have a lot of questions, and rebalancing would be the key to monitoring tools that you will use right through your investment journey.
Thanks, Vijay. Actually, when you touch that point, asset allocation is key. I can definitely share my own experience. Before the March 20, since I am closer to retirement, I had a 90-10, 90 in debt and 10 in equity because I didn't want to take any risk. So when the market corrected, I was really happy. I didn't bother about the market fall. But what it gave me was a real good opportunity. I increased my equity to 30% when the correction happened. And all of us know what is the return you would have got in that. I think very important to rebalance the portfolio. I think that's the point which I wanted to highlight. And it is an ongoing exercise, It is not that you do just only one. So I fully agree with you, Vijay. The related question here is people sometimes feel that it is very complicated and I don't know how much time to spend. What is your thought on that? Is it that complicated or is it very easy to manage it?
Yeah. So you can make it as complicated as you want to, as you wish to, or you can keep it really simple, right? So it's all entirely up to us. So with apps in vogue now, you constantly check your portfolio. There is a tendency for you to constantly want to act, right? So that makes it more complex. So the key thing is in mutual funds, the idea is to monitor less because you have experts doing it for you. You have your fund managers doing it for you. The idea is to just ensure that, your funds are doing the way they ought to or in line with peers, for which, even a half yearly review will be more than enough, in my opinion, because you cannot even make decisions based on month or quarter to quarter blips, right? Sometimes funds will go down and then they pick up. Sometimes strategies may not work. A value strategy, for example, may not work in a very bull market, a rallying market. Doesn't mean that you have to immediately exit, right? So this frequency with which you actually review may turn out to be counterproductive. A half yearly or an annual, for a rebalancing, in my view, an annual should do, because it's not often that your portfolio will inflate. A 60-40 needs a real big bull market to take it to 70-30. So it's not often that you will even need to rebalance. On review, you will at least need to see, 3 to 4 quarters of performance before you can take a decision, right? So that being the case, if you're very particular, yes, you could do a half yearly review of your portfolio, see where your funds stand. But otherwise, if you don't have the time, an annual should be quite okay too, in my view.
Probably they also need to consider the taxation aspect of withdrawing earlier also, right?
Exactly. So the more you try to churn, the more you end up, unknowingly paying taxes. Very true.
True. Yeah. Next question, Vidyaji. Today when I look at a portfolio, there will be equity, there could be a debt portfolio, and maybe some other asset class also. So when it comes to monitoring, what are the metrics I need to look at? Maybe even the category of fund could be a equity, debt, or a hybrid fund. So do you think there are different metrics to monitor each of this category of mutual funds?
Yes. So we cannot, because we are not going to compare apples to apples. They are all of different breed. So you will need different metrics to compare. There can be some common metrics, yes, but largely, equity and equity oriented funds can have common metrics, and debt oriented funds can have a set of metrics. So when it comes to equity, basically, more than just, all of you do look at point to point returns, 1 year, 3 year, 5 years, etc. But more than that, it's important to see the consistency of the fund. How regularly is it able to stay where it stays? It's not important that the fund stays at the top. It's important that it is consistent in where it stays. Of course, that doesn't mean that it's consistently in the bottom quartile and so consistency at least being in the top 2 quartiles, right, over several periods. So the way to look at it, either you can simply go by calendar years if you don't have much data and see how consistently is this fund maintaining its position compared with its peers, similar category funds. Or if you do know a little more of the market, you could look at down and up phases in the market. Has this fund been able to contain downsides better in down markets? How has it fared in down markets? Because in the Indian context, largely the ability of funds to deliver is determined by how well they have contained downsides, right? Because no fund can always have top winning stocks. So rather than focusing on being a chart toppers, if they're able to contain downsides, they actually do quite well. So ability to contain downsides in down markets, and where they are in up markets, are they able to, kind of at least be in the top 2 quartiles, etc. So consistency is one of the key factors. One way to look at it, if you want to go deeper than calendar years or different market phases, would be rolling returns, right? So if you take rolling returns, there are tools online that you could check to see. So the rolling returns will tell you how consistently the fund has been and what periods has it performed, what periods it's not performed, the proportion of its outperformance over its peers. For example, if I say a fund is able to beat its peers 80% of the times, so it's highly consistent. It's out there more than the category 80% of the times. So other than this, there are very, other metrics like the Sharpe ratio, the information ratio, the standard deviation, how volatile is a fund, right? The downside probability, how much can it go down and what is the probability of that, and so on. So there are several metrics you could even search and look, but the key thing in all of these metrics is consistency. So all of these metrics use rolling returns. Your Sharpe or your standard deviation or your information ratio will use rolling returns, because point to point essentially means from A point to B point. If this A point or B point were an extraordinary period, your returns will look extraordinary good or bad, right? So instead, if I see over time, so today, year ago, yesterday, a year ago, that's what rolling returns is about, right? So if you go on seeing this, you will know over different periods how the fund has performed. It's also because you're not putting an investment at one point, right? Different people would have put at different dates. So you need to know how the returns would fare had you put on any time of the year. So that's the idea of rolling returns. So largely in equity, your rolling returns and all other metrics based on rolling returns should give you a very good story about a fund either going down or a fund picking up. So it will give you very early trends. So that's the beauty of rolling returns. In hybrid, especially equity-oriented hybrid, the same will hold good, except that you use also additional metrics to look at the debt portfolio, right? The quality of the debt portfolio, very importantly, because what sort of papers, although it may be only 35% or 40%, what sort of papers, are they high on credit risk? Are they AA plus and above or below? What proportion is in, over AA plus? Is it in line with its mandate if the fund has stated where it will invest and so on? So this is very important, right? Because in debt, oftentimes you can get hurt even when your equity is doing too well. So that's on hybrid. When it comes to debt and debt-oriented funds, in debt, your risk-free rate is good, but in debt, the ability of a fund to navigate, especially if they take duration risk, that is, they like dynamic bond funds, they take a 7-year and a 3-year and so on. Their ability to take the right interest rate calls matters. How will you find that out? You basically look at interest rate scenarios and how the fund has performed. If that's too difficult, you can simply look at consistency in performance of these funds, along with its peers, whether they have consistently bet their peers. The other important thing is volatility. In these kind of funds, you don't want your debt fund to be swinging up and down, right? When you're taking duration calls, the fund can tend to be very, very volatile. So because you are using debt as a way to hedge your equity portfolio, you don't want it to be swinging all the time. So you could look at volatility. These are more on the quantitative side, the worst return. So that will give you an idea whether the fund can go really bad, in terms of supposing, the fund has had negative 1 year returns. You should know, whether it will fit your risk profile at all. Probably it's a fund that needs to be held for 3-4 years. So you will understand it when you look at it. The more important thing in debt will be the credit quality, especially when the fund does not define its credit. For example, it's very well defined in the corporate bond space. It's very defined in the credit risk space. But in other places, you have to check in whether this fund's holding of risky papers is in line with category or not, one, and two, whether you want to take that kind of a risk. For example, you come to debt to have protection and you don't want anything adventurous. You can't have your fund holding 50-60% in papers below AA plus, right? Of course, there may be quality papers even there, but as a retail investor, it's hard for you to figure that. So on by and large, whether there are quality papers above AA plus, a majority of your portfolio, 60-70% of your portfolio, whether it's above AA plus, all these will matter. When the fund starts slipping on these parameters, they're becoming more risky. Similarly, you could look at rolling returns also for debt to know whether the fund is consistently able to deliver. Of course, it will deliver in line with interest rate cycle. You can't expect when the rate cycle to be very low, you can't expect a short duration fund to be delivering 9%, right? So that's not, so you have to keep in mind the interest rate cycle we are in and where the fund is delivering in line with peers. So broadly, I would say quality of portfolio becomes a lot more important in debt. And as far as equity is concerned, to a large extent, you can leave that to fund managers to, you can be sure that they are taking the right equity calls. But the question is about whether they are consistently able to deliver for you. So you focus on consistency there and quality in a debt and debt oriented portfolios.
Thanks, Vidyaji. And a related question here, since you spoke about ratio, Sharpe, and information and Sortino. People always say that all these are looking at the past data. It doesn't guarantee you the future performance. Then how do you rely on these data? This is one question which keeps coming in our meetings also.
Yeah.
Did you experience somebody who has proved in the past has failed in the future? With your experience in handling so many schemes, and I'm sure would have analyzed a lot of data. Just share your experience on that. How good is this data we can trust? And that's it, yeah.
So before sharing my experience, just a quick note on this, why we look at past data. The problem with many of investors looking at past data is they naturally form a bias on their return expectation based on past data, right? So oftentimes past data is misunderstood to be the return potential of a fund, which is not the case. So we never look at past data to look at return potential. Return potential is entirely to do with the quality of stocks today, where we are in the economy today, and multiple other things, where we are in corporate earnings, in the economy and so on. So the return forecast that you have in mind is nothing to do with the past data. So why are we looking at past data? The reason why we are looking at past data is to know whether the fund has handled bull markets or down markets, or if it's a growth fund, whether it's a growth strategy or value fund, value strategy, in the way that it ought to have, right? So the ability of a fund, one, to stick to its mandate, and two, to perform across market cycles. So when we look only at a vast set of data across various periods, we understand that X fund has really, been through the cycles. It has gone down and it has proven its mettle to kind of pick up. And why? Because it had certain strategies in place, right? So this is what basically past data tells us, by and large. But when I said rolling returns plays an important role, because rolling returns can show you that there are trends that are picking up. A fund that has been, really languishing. When it picks up, because when you tend to roll the return daily and look, you know the uptick. So in those cases, it's somewhat like technicals, I would say, not exactly, but that those kind of trends do show in your rolling returns flows. To that extent, past returns help, but again, it's not a way to predict returns. Now, my own experience on with funds, analyzing funds, largely, so funds don't out of the blue go into terrible performance unless there is something terribly wrong. I mean, we have had few instances in the debt space where sudden events happen and then it just everything goes berserk. But that's not the case in under normal circumstances. So a fund strategy may fail. A few stocks that the fund held may not be delivering for a long while, and the fund may have not corrected its course. Those kind of things start showing up in performance, right? So I have personally seen in quite a few funds over the past decade, funds that have been at the top for very long just moved into oblivion slowly, right? So now this, it's not like we had to wait for 10 years to know that it had gone down. There are clear signs in terms of performance. There are, clear, if you just even look at the top 10 stocks, top 15 stocks, you will know whether those stocks are performing or not. You will know whether the weights given are completely out of sync with the index, So these kind of cues actually tell you whether this fund is going to go anywhere or not. Of course, it's not very easy for a retail investor, but these are questions you can ask your advisor too. Or if you're a do-it-yourself investor, you could check your portfolio on why certain fund, for consistently for 3-4 quarters has not been. It's past data, but it should worry you if the performance has been down for long. For example, if you had taken value funds a year ago, value funds picked up, in recent year, but before that in 2018, value funds were not performing. So many of you had a doubt, right? So we thought, this is the end of these funds. These are not great performers, but suddenly, value started picking up, right? So here again, if you had simply relied on past data, poor performance, and dropped that value fund, when that uptick actually happened, you may not have gained, right? So the past data has to be taken to know the behavior of a fund, its ability to tackle markets. But past data alone will not tell you whether the fund is going to perform in future or not. However, you will get, if you use rolling return tools, you will get enough cues to know whether a fund has been steadily dipping or otherwise.
Thanks. I think you gave a very elaborate answer. I'm sure participants would have got some clarity on this. The next related question here is, I always face this from investors as well as from our advisors many a time. See, when market is doing well, they are in a dilemma whether to book profit. As you rightly mentioned, if I'm doing a rebalancing, automatically I'll book profit. Right now, my mind tells me, but this rally can be there for a longer period, so I may. So it is better to stay. So the problem comes whether I should stay or should I book the profit. How do you address it? Or I just follow the rebalancing and ensure that the asset allocation is maintained. Well, it's a tough call when markets are bullish. Yeah.
Right. You have answered that question, sir. So it is a very tough call. And the greatest of investors haven't got the call right? Nobody can really, exactly exit at the point of peak or at the point. If we go by valuations, I would say a year ago, we should have booked profits. If we went merely by valuations, all of us should have moved into cash a year ago. But look at the kind of rally we have had even post that, right? So you would have solidly lost about 44-45% of returns post that too if we had just exited. So there is never a point that you will know. Similarly, averaging, you never know whether this is the bottom, right? So the best way to tackle one is rebalancing. Very simple. You look at your portfolio, you don't look at the market, and you see whether your portfolio is inflated, because Mr. Gururaj may have entered the market at a different point. I may have entered very recently. So for me, profit booking may not make sense because, I haven't seen that much profits, but he may have been around for so long that his portfolio will look a lot more inflated, right? So in my opinion, profit booking is very unique to each portfolio, each portfolio's risk and each portfolio's asset allocation. So the best, instead of constantly trying to time the market, is to rebalance. Do an annual. If you see if it's inflated, just bring it back. Don't worry about whether you're at the right place. What you can do additionally is, even when you're doing SIPs, when the market corrects, right, you still have, if you have some lump sum or which you, or you're anything that you're parked in liquid fund, you can always consider deploying at those points. That's not very difficult as opposed to booking profits. Booking profits is always a challenge, and it's best done through rebalancing. Whereas averaging, you have some idea, right? So you see the correction and you'll be able to deploy some. So these two simple strategies for retail investors, rather than trying to guess the Nifty levels and the price earning levels, would be you can keep life simple.
So another related question, Vidyaji. I have never seen somebody's portfolio where all the schemes are doing extremely well. So there will be always one or two schemes which is underperforming, right? Now, when do I take that call? Yes, this is a time to move from this scheme. How do I decide that?
Right. So the first thing is, how long should you wait, right, before you take the call? The second thing is also, what happens if I don't take that call? Am I going to be hurt deeply or not, right? I don't know how to take the call, so what would I do? So first thing about when to take the call is you will have to, it's not about a month or a quarter or sometimes even a half year. So one, you need to understand, is your fund underperforming or is it the market that is not doing well, right? Oftentimes we miss that. We may not realize, or that strategy. Like I said earlier, value. Right now, growth, some of the growth funds are not doing too well. Some of the high growth funds are not doing too well. So is it the strategy that is failing or is it the fund's fault really, right? To know that, you need to compare with the right peers. There is no point just comparing it with Nifty 50 and then realizing my fund is underperforming, because Nifty 50's strategy may be entirely different from your own fund's strategy. So the best is to understand or ask your advisor, which are the peers, how are they doing, right? So once you understand the strategy and compare the right funds and you see your fund underperforming, if you want something like, if it's underperforming its peer by, over 3 percentage points or so consistently over 3-4 quarters, you will have a reason to worry, right? Even then, you don't have to right away act. Sometimes if you're running a SIP, it's enough that you stop a SIP because you don't want to be paying taxes or short-term capital, unnecessarily, etc. Stop the SIP and you can switch the SIP to better funds in your own portfolio and wait and watch. 3 to 6 quarters, at least 6 quarters in my own experience, it takes before you can really decide, okay, I've given this fund enough time. Or is the margin of underperformance shrinking? If it's shrinking, you don't have to worry. It means the fund is doing some things right. And that's why that margin of underperformance is shrinking. So that's a good news. If you see that, earlier it was underperforming by 4-5 percentage points and now it's come down to 2-3 or so, maybe it's going to improve further, right? So you could give it time. So I would say, 3 to 6 quarters, and then, at least, if it is more than 3 percentage points over this period, you will have a reason to worry. Now, if the second thing is about how much allocation does this fund have in your portfolio, and that will determine whether it's going to hurt you or not, right? So if you're having 15-20% or more of a single fund, or 25% sometimes of a single fund in your portfolio, the underperformance can really start hurting your portfolio. If you leave it, like if you just leave it for 2 years, 3 years, yes, there will be. It really won't hurt in a year because you can always make up. So I have seen over the years, many investors' portfolio with even 20-25 funds with, sometimes even 10-12 funds underperforming, but those 10-12 funds would not be a high proportion of their portfolio. So that way their portfolio overall returns would still not have suffered. But if it's 20-25% a single fund, it really hurts. So if this process is too difficult, the better option would be to ensure that you curtail excessive exposure to individual funds, right? So that way you will ensure that you're not going to get too hurt in case you're not aware that your fund is underperforming. So that's another way. And this is very important in debt. More than in equity, it's very important in debt, simply because a single for debt fund not performing, or it's in debt, it's a 0-1 kind of a game. So if something hits, the NAV hit can be really high, and if you held 25-30% in that single fund, it can hurt you. So the best is for you to kind of diversify, so that way you will reduce your risk even if you don't know how to assess it.
I fully agree with you on this point, Vijay, because I had exposure to one of the credit funds, and in the last year when it got hit, luckily I could manage myself because my exposure was only 5% in that fund. So it makes a lot of sense to have a proper allocation and not to exceed the limit. As you rightly said, if I had some 50% exposure, I don't know what would have happened to my portfolio. I think this is a very important point investors should keep in mind, because don't allocate the more than a fixed percentage, and whichever you are comfortable allocate, because debt has huge category of funds. Not necessarily I have to put all my money in just one category, and unfortunately anything can happen in investments, and if you take a hit, then it doesn't make sense. So I think I fully agree with you on that. And I also want to ask you one more question. See, some clients will have a long-term portfolio. Somebody might have a medium-term portfolio or even a short-term portfolio. Is this review, the method of reviewing, will it change based on whether it is a long-term portfolio or a medium-term or a short-term, or the process is the same?
Right. So there is a slight, your ability to take uncertainty and your ability to take risks get reduced when there is a short-term goal, right? So you cannot therefore give a long leeway to a fund to underperform. You don't have a choice. I mean, so that kind of puts your entire goal off track, because you don't have time to make up for lost performance later, which is what long-term gives us. Long-term gives us the comfort of, even if I was with a poor performing fund for 2-3 years, I can still switch, and over the a 10-year period, I would have still caught up. But so therefore, in short term, first of all, in short term, your ability to take risks is that much low, and therefore your ability to also take any kind of underperformance is low. The best you can do in short term is one, to keep, first of all, your own expectation toned down in any kind of that way. I mean, psychologically, you will not, because your expectations are high and your fund does not perform, you will end up churning, you will end up paying taxes, and ultimately you may not even. So when you're saving, keep your expectation low, which means you will be saving higher when your return expectations are toned down. So I'm giving a more proactive approach rather than a reactive. Tone down your expectation when it comes to investing, and when it comes to short term, when you see risks in funds, cut that position. You cannot afford any kind of risks in the short term. Here again, more than in equity, in debt, because in equity, I'm assuming in the short to medium term, you won't have much exposure to equity. So when in debt, for example, you're going for a credit risk fund, when your time frame is say 1.5 years, you're putting yourself to a lot of risk, right? You may not have time for any kind of recovery if some money goes bad in that any of the instruments in the fund. So the best you can kind of do is to ensure, first of all, you don't take high risks when it comes to the short term. And when you see a fund exceeding its limit or taking higher risks, and in debt, especially when its returns are even abnormal, I would worry. When returns in a debt fund are totally out of sync with the category, you need to inquire what's happening there for it to get that kind of returns, right? So therefore, your ability to quietly sit and watch is actually much lower when it comes to short to medium term. Sure. So your review has to be a little proactive.
Right. Yeah. Thanks, Sujay. This also reminds me, I think SEBI is doing a lot of good work on the debt side. Right. They are bringing this regulation of this credit score, and even the modified duration. They are defining the period, and if I change that period, then it is a change in fundamental attribute. Investor will be given an exit option. So all these are welcome changes. I think probably investors will be able to identify which fund is more riskier. Looking at that credit score, I think these are some welcome changes which is happening. I'm sure that will help our investors to at least review better. And again, I also want to ask one more question. I will not say exactly a problem. What normally we tend to do is if my ticket size is bigger, we always feel that, for example, let's say I want to invest in a large cap fund and SIP of, let's say 50,000. So instead of putting in one large cap fund, we try to diversify across 4 or probably 3 large cap funds of 3 different mutual funds. Now, when I look at this, there is a possibility that overlapping of portfolio would be happening if I sit and try to match their 3 portfolio. So my question here is, then how do I diversify? Is there, see, for example, I want to invest in large cap based on my risk profile, and I have a higher ticket size. So, but I don't want to put it in one fund. So how do you think I should do this?
Right. So when it comes to diversifying, looking at stocks, overlap of stocks can be an informational exercise. But for a retail investor, it may not really throw anything that will help him or her decide. Right. So you see, 50-60% of 2 portfolios overlapping. What do you do about that? Because the portfolio is not static, right? So in another 2 months, portfolio can entirely change too. So while it's interesting exercise to know, how much of stock exposure you got in each scheme, I would say the right way would be to understand each fund's strategy. So when you're given 2 large cap funds, you should be asking your advisor, or you should, if you're a do-it-yourself investor, know whether I'm picking the same style funds. Are they following the same style? Are they both high growth? Or is it one value and one growth? These days, fund houses have enough presentations on their websites, or periodically come out or even mail you on a fund strategy explaining, what it does, why it does, etc. So it's not difficult for a retail investor to know that. So when you mix and match these two advantages. One, there will naturally be less overlap of stocks, because when one fund is going to go with growth stocks, another is going to look partly for value stocks, or one is cyclical, one is more defensive, and so on. You will have a mix. So that will help you. Second thing, it will also ensure at least one of the fund is performing at any point in time. Because if you go all out on value, and value is not performing for 2 years, you will have a portfolio that is underperforming. Instead, if you had mixed it with growth, you will ensure that there is some balance and your portfolio keeps sticking, right? So you will achieve both of these purposes by understanding style and strategy, rather than just looking at the market cap segment and just saying 3 funds in this or 2 funds in the other one.
Perfect, Vijay. Thanks a lot for this clarification. I think that will clear a lot of doubts in their mind. Next is, we always try to compare our performance with a benchmark. And today, especially SEBI bringing in that rule, total return index is what we need to compare. I'm sure people will say that almost every fund is not beating the total return index. So let me go into the index fund. So, and if I look at the last year, I don't want to restrict myself to last 1 year, because active funds have a role to play. That is my strong belief. But my more important question here is, if I should not compare my performance with the benchmark, what is that I should compare my performance there?
Right. So, the idea of comparing with benchmark is, being active funds, you should have the ability to beat. But unfortunately, active funds also have a lot of restrictions in terms of weight, cap in weight of individual stocks. For example, a single Reliance stock could lift the Nifty at one point in time, and funds were unable to take those kind of weights. So the moment a fund underperforms because of its inability to do what exactly the index can do for short to medium periods of time, doesn't entirely mean that you have to ignore that fund. The way would be to compare it with peers, right? So if, in fact, there have been times, even now, beginning, because from March 21, our returns of, if you look at mid cap funds, small cap funds, because we had a low base of March 20, you would see very high returns, but those returns across funds will be far lower than the benchmark, right? Across. So it doesn't make any sense. And by how much? Sometimes by 15 percentage points and 20 percentage points. So if you look at rolling returns, it will tell you this. So between March and June, had you looked at 1 year rolling returns, the underperformance of benchmark funds across, so then do you just ditch all of them? And if you look at longer periods, obviously many of them have. So the idea is to see whether your fund is better among the crop. In the example that I gave, the mid-cap index did a lot of things that mid-cap funds could never have done. So there were stocks which mid-cap funds would never have held, or small-cap funds would never have held, which soared, right? So there are other issues also. So without knowing that, the best way to do it is to first compare it with the category, right? And within category, if you have little more, nuanced investor, you can look at styles also. This fund has this style of investing, and I'm comparing it with similar peers. So that will also help you kind of know. So that way you will not be too worried if suddenly your fund or many of the funds that you hold are underperforming the benchmark. When it comes to index funds, they serve a very different purpose, in the sense, if your idea is to not be doing this review and understanding and, following, then, I will just buy and, just shut it out. Then, index makes sense. So their purposes are very different.
Thanks, Vidya. Two more questions before we take the question from the participant. One is sometimes I select a fund based on the objective, or it matches my requirement, right? All of a sudden, if that mandate is getting changed, how do I track that, whether the fund is following the mandate or not? Because see, all of a sudden, maybe it is done with the good intention. See, for example, if you see that when credit scenario was very bad, somebody might be overweight with government bonds so that they are reducing the risk in the portfolio. But somewhere I have entered thinking that this credit risk fund will give me a better return. So, how do I track whether there is, the mandate is being followed or it is not followed? How do I judge that?
So, if you're going to do this yourself, you will need to look at portfolios at least every quarter to kind of see. Actually, the fund returns will give you cues most of the time. So when you look at your portfolio, you will know, your fund which hasn't delivered much is suddenly delivering much more, or vice versa. A fund which has been performing suddenly has decided to. There have been post 2020 credit risk funds that held maybe less than 10% in below AA plus. They all went, into. So naturally, they will not, they wouldn't have delivered the kind of returns that credit risk should, and vice versa too. So looking at your portfolio would become very important. When it comes to equity too, if there is no clear style that you can identify beyond a point, it will make sense. It can be one of the reasons for you to stop a fund, right? There is no harm in my view, because you are styling your portfolio with a certain mix to suit your risk profile and return expectation. And there are funds which somehow garner returns, but you cannot really, label them into any category, anything, right? It's very hard. Unless, you don't mind, as long as it's returning, fine. If you don't mind all that, fine. But otherwise, if you have built a portfolio with some risk assessment and you are not able to figure why this fund is doing what it is doing from where it was, you should first, of course, read the fund's offer document. I mean, the original is a scheme information document, and whether there have been any changes, and look at recent presentations. All of these, especially in debt, some of them debt funds say they are doing a roll down strategy, but the scheme information document may say nothing about it. They are just following it. So you may not understand why suddenly the returns are kind of tapering off, or what is exactly happening. So it's important to do some amount of assessment before that. Or better still, if you know to ask the right questions, please pose those questions to your advisor. Even simply based on performance, has this fund changed its color? Your advisor will get the information, from the AMC, and also kind of take a call. But if it's not fitting your risk profile, especially, it is a call that you have to take, take a relook at whether you should continue.
Vidyaji, I just want to end this with one question from your own experience. We spoke about all this, how to review, how to rebalance, and all those things we have discussed. From your experience of handling clients, can you quote some client's experience where he really benefited when you have followed all this process? Any experience? Yeah.
Right. So I'll actually date back. It was not a client, but a person who was following us when we were in the newspaper. So they, this person essentially would without knowing that he was doing a rebalancing. Every year, he would simply open his portfolio on December 31st and clean up his funds if he thinks they are underperforming, etc. And also rebalance. So in 2007 end, he found that his portfolio had significantly grown. Equity, we were at the peak of, he was not a person who was regularly tracking markets. He was in an IT and he had no time to also, but all he knew was this is way above where I started off. It looks huge. So let me just move some amount. So he moved some amounts, some liquid or short-term debt from his equity debt to bring about his balance, right? And come 2008, the kind of fall we all know, that the Nifty, had over 50% fall, obviously because he had booked those profits without his knowing that this was going to happen in 2008. He had preserved it. So it just didn't become, profits that went off in thin air. He could actually do. And the best part was this, 2008 end, he found, of course, his portfolio also suffered, although he took some profits. His portfolio suffered. It was something like, maybe his 60-40 portfolio became something like 49 or 50% in equity at the end of 2008. So all he knew was, my asset balance is not okay. It was 60% and now it's at 50%. Let me average. So the beauty is that by rebalancing, he had contained, his portfolio was at least probably 10% higher than where he would have been had he not rebalanced. Right. Similarly, he would be averaging more now, right? Because, his equity had already reduced, in the sense he had taken out equity. So now he could actually put in more money without his knowing in 2008. And it doesn't matter, he didn't have to time March 2009. He simply, did this in end 2008 and he still ended with triple-digit returns the next year, significantly higher than the market too. So this is the kind of averaging that we are actually looking at. We don't have to catch that October 2008 or March 2009 or March 2020, not necessary, right? So this is exactly what one needs to look at to keep a portfolio in good form.
Yeah. Thanks, Vijayati, for your time, and really you have answered all the questions which is important to the investor. Nishant, I would like you to take it over, and any questions we can get it addressed. Over to you, Nishant.
Vidya could take it. So Amit wants to understand how many schemes should I hold to achieve financial goals, and which category of schemes he wanted to understand.
Right. So there are no, kind of cookie cutter, ways to do this. The number of schemes that you need to hold will depend on your quantum of money also, right? So for example, you're just starting to invest with 1,500 or 2,000 rupees. You needn't be having 5-6 schemes, right? Maybe 2 or, 2 schemes or so should do. But in general, over my own experience over the years, anything over, as you grow your portfolio, anything over, 8 to 12 funds gets more complex. And it doesn't particularly achieve, I'm talking of equity plus debt put together. That's a max limit. Even in 8, you can actually, it doesn't add any new style or strategy when you cross this kind of a threshold. You end up only having funds with same styles, just from different fund houses. That's all that you'd achieve. So depending on your amount, as your portfolio grows, you will need those 8 or so, because otherwise your portfolio will become too concentrated, especially in debt. If you're just having, 4 funds, you may end up having 25% in individual funds, and that's a very big risk in debt, as we all know over the past year, how it has hurt. So that's one thing. The other thing is, instead of looking at what categories to have, important thing is, once you fix your asset allocation based on your time frame, the important thing is to understand, for my asset allocation, how will my risk profile pan out? For example, if you're a long-term investor, you have 10 years, then you could take a little more of mid caps than you usually can, because you have some time frame, you have some that leeway to do it. But if you only have 5 years, you can't go overboard on your mid cap and small cap allocation, right? So you need to basically, your time frame will determine largely your risk profile in very simple terms, and that will determine what categories you go for.
Okay. Okay. So Abhilash Thakur wants to understand how to find data on rolling returns. Is it available publicly?
Yes, you do have, you can just Google rolling returns calculator, rolling returns. You will get quite a few, websites that offer. Some of them allow you to download. You could just check those out.
Okay. So is it free to use or investors need to pay?
No, it is available in free form also.
Okay. 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 And Rahul Danayak wants to understand which website. So you have already answered this. Piyush Trivedia wants to know view on long-term SIP in conservative, hybrid, and pure debt funds.
View on long-term SIPs, is it?
Yeah, especially in categories like conservative, hybrid, and pure debt funds.
See, if you are running a long-term portfolio, there needs to be some debt in it. And as part of it, therefore, you'll end up doing SIPs in debt. So there is no harm. I mean, you can't necessarily have a view. Your only thing should be whether what sort of category in debt funds you need to have, right? People who are risk averse may just stick to ultra short or short term, even if you have a long duration SIP. There is no harm in having a short duration fund for a longer period. Or if you can handle some volatility in debt, you might want to go for a longer period. Conservative hybrids, in my view, are okay if your investable amount is low and you cannot separately allocate, in equity and debt. In those cases, hybrids will ensure that you have a mix of two asset classes within the same fund. But yeah, running SIPs in debt is perfectly fine if it's part of a long-term goal.
Okay.
Nishant, I just want to add my experience here. See, what I did was, man, I call my SIP as SIP for market correction.
Mm-hmm.
So what I do is I do a SIP in arbitrage fund. And trust me, man, in that March 20, when I said, right, man, I was getting 3.5% in arbitrage. I didn't worry about it because my purpose is market correction. Now, when that market correction happened, I switched to banking sector. My 2 lakh has become 5 lakhs in this period. Why I'm saying is, somewhere market will always give you an opportunity like this in future also. The only thing is we don't know when it is, right? Mm-hmm. But what is in my control is I should have money. Mm-hmm. How do I ensure I have money? Man, that's where I feel do a SIP in an arbitrage fund. Don't even touch that fund and call it as a SIP for market correction. I think when market correction happens, just close your eyes and transfer it, but you will make money, which is what she was also saying, right? Guy who didn't know December, he realized equity exposure is less, he just pumped his money. And earlier December, he felt my portfolio has gone up, he booked profit. I think somewhere we should have this habit of doing a SIP for market correction, man. Just don't touch that fund until the correction happens. And allow it to grow as and when the correction happens, don't worry. If it comes after 5 years, fine. Absolutely, you would have accumulated good money there. Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to share my experience. That's it. Yeah.
Great. Basically, you are putting some cash in liquid form or through arbitrage fund.
Arbitrage fund, I'm just doing an SIP, 8,000 SIP every month. That's it. So I'm not even looking at that return. People will get worried, 3.5 return. If I kept in the bank, I would have got more. My purpose is not that. It is very easy to switch internally. That is the purpose why I'm doing it. So my 3.5% for 2 years and 100% in the next 1.5 years, my overall CAGR is much more. So, man, I strongly believe keep accumulating market correction, SIP, that's it. And do it when the market correction happens.
Great. So, Vidya, another question has come through chat by Ardhendu Das. He has 3 funds, one large cap, one mid cap, one large and mid cap. Each fund have 20 lakh rupees of assets. Then each fund has 33% exposure to my equity portfolio. Is it risky? 5-10%. Okay, so he wants to understand the risk proposition. Mm-hmm. Yeah, is it too risky to hold many equity schemes?
It depends on what proportion of debt you also hold. When I say debt, it need not be debt funds. You might have traditional forms like FDs, etc., which is fine, right? So your time frame is very important. For example, if your time frame is 3 years and you're holding 70% equity, you are taking high risk. No doubt about it, because especially in this kind of market, and it also depends on what part of the market rally, you enter the market. We are already well into a huge rally and you've entered now. 70-30 would pose a risk, definitely, especially if your goal is non-negotiable, right? You need that money in the next 3 years. So in general, as a general thumb rule, I would say, even to go something like 60% in equities, you need to have at least a 5-year time frame, in my view, because most of us associate risks with returns. We don't associate risk with losses. So once you experience that you can have a loss, that's when you understand what really can be your asset allocation. So if you have gone through those market phases and you can take risks, good for you, more power. But if you have not and you're relatively new to the market, you should take on lower equity and slowly up it as you get comfortable with the market.
So
there is a related question also to here. See, what he says is that 70% equity is distributed among 3 categories of equity funds. So which is roughly around 25 to 30%. So when we said you don't have a higher exposure, he says if I restrict to 5 or 10%, my number of schemes will go up. So that is also his concern. How do you address that?
No, so there is no harm in having concentrated exposure to categories per se, provided those categories are not high risk categories. For example, if I decide to have 60% in large cap, it doesn't matter, right? So I could still have 2 or 3 different styled large cap funds and have it. But if I decide to have 60% in mid caps, or for that matter in large and mid caps, so supposing my large and mid cap put together is 60%, that's quite high risk. So it's not the category per se, but whether the category per se is risky, right? So your small cap can't be very high, your mid cap, because that when they get hit, they can be hit very hard, and sometimes the same set of stocks don't even come up, which means after one fall, some small cap funds or mid cap funds entirely go out of the picture and newer ones come, because that's how stocks also behave in the mid and small space.
Right. Thanks, Vijay. Nishant, any more questions?
Yeah. I think 3 more questions are there. Rajesh Parik wants to understand. He can do SIP of 20,000 for 5 and 10 years. He has a 5 to 10 years of horizon, and he wants to understand some funds in the aggressive categories. I mean, which fund he should look at.
Okay, unfortunately, I think we will not be giving fund specific, suggestions. Of course, you could look at. Yes, you could look up even our own, where we have recommendations in our website, etc. But I'll not be able to, come up with recommendations here.
Okay.
Anything on the category you can say, Vidyaji? Just the category?
Yeah, I would say, if he is not a new investor to the market, I would say he could, maybe have a majority in flexi cap funds, more than even large cap. I would say, 30-40% in flexi cap funds or so, and up to 20 in mid and small, if again he is familiar with market. Otherwise 10 to 15%, and the rest in debt. I think this kind of 60 to 70 max in equity and the rest in debt should fulfill his need.
Okay. So Vidya, one interesting question by Rushabh Mehta. He says that if he keeps on churning his portfolio by rebalancing it, how would compounding happen?
No, you are not. Compounding continues to happen as long as you stay invested, right? We are not taking the money and putting it in savings bank. Please remember that it's very different in stocks. So in stocks, you book profits. Unless you redeploy it, it's lying in your bank account. But when we say rebalancing is not about taking out the money and putting it. It is moving from one asset class to another. So from equity to debt or gold, or from debt to equity when equity falls, or from gold to debt or equity. You are essentially, that's why it's called rebalancing. You're moving from one asset class to another asset class where money is still growing and your compounding still happens.
Okay. So since we are running out of time, I'll take one more question. Which is what is sufficient time frame to invest in small cap funds?
Well, as it is the case with equity, I would say anything with less than 5 to 7 year time frame in equity is a strict no, right? So you should be willing to kind of lose your money, if it's like 3 years, 4 years, and still wait it out. That is the mindset with which, in my view, you come to equity. So 5 to 7 year in my view, will give a very comfortable. Why am I sticking to that 7 year? Because if you take historically, our data says over a 7 year period is the point of no loss. That is, Indian equities haven't really delivered negative returns over any 7 year time frames when you roll returns. So that's a very kind of that has applied over several years now. Except in bull markets, you might be tempted to think 2 years is a long-term time frame, and 3 year. But in general, it's a 7 year rule works well for most.
Guru Raj, if you want to add something to this.
No, that's it from my side here. That's it, yeah.
Okay. So with that, we have come to an end to this interesting session. Thank you so much, Vidya, for such an insightful session. Mr. Guru Raj, you have very well conducted the session, and many thanks for that.
Thank you.
Finally, I am thankful to our audience who have, I'm sure that they have thoroughly enjoyed this session. Finally, I thank each one of you. Thank you.